Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Slapstick. My name is Matthew Sweet. It's my great pleasure to introduce you to this event. Now, we would normally be doing this kind of thing live and in person in some fabulous venue in Bristol, but we can't do that because of the crisis, capital C. But we are keeping the Slapstick custard warm on YouTube with a series of live events over the next few Friday nights. And tonight, it's my great pleasure to tell you that the legendary, but he does actually exist, Graeme Garden will be joining us for an hour or so of conversation and a Q&A about his contribution to radio comedy. Now, when Graeme comes to Bristol, he's often enthusing about Buster Keaton, and then we can see the evidence up on the screen of all the gags that he nicked from Buster Keaton over the years. He couldn't do that, of course, for the radio comedy part of his career, though there may be some revelations of that order tonight. So tonight we're going to kind of recreate. We're going to do one of those Bristol slapstick events, but we're going to, in a way, revive that old family tradition of sitting around the computer and watching the same YouTube video, because this is where it's all happening tonight. So Graeme will be talking about his long career in radio comedy, about The Unbelievable Truth, his latest hit, and into the deep depths of his past. And we need to say this is a fundraising event, yes, and you know what that means, don't you? 80% of Slapstick's revenue comes from ticket sales. So if you could bring yourself to tap away at the donate button that's at the bottom of your screen, we would be very, very grateful, because it allows us to keep all of these things going. So now I'm going to conjure Graeme into the room by rubbing at the magic Laurel and Hardy as though they were Aladdin's lamp, seeing if I can bring, and there he is. Graeme, welcome to the online version of Slapstick.
Hello, good to be here.
We're going to be listening as much as looking tonight. We're going to be thinking about the wireless, and I suppose we should start by finding out about your radio habits as a child. What were you listening to?
Well, very much listening to the radio, because we didn't have a television when I started becoming interested in comedy. So it was, I suppose I caught the tail end of Itmar, the end of the war. And then there were shows like Take It From Here, the great Dennis Norden and Frank Muir shows. There was Up the Pole with Jimmy Jewell and Ben Warris, all those extraordinary people. Then shows I didn't enjoy quite so much, like the Clitheroe Kid. But,
did you understand the jokes on Itmar, Graeme?
Sorry?
Did you understand the jokes on Itmar?
I guess I didn't really, but I just liked the sound of people laughing at it. And no, that was good fun. But yes, later on, when I was a little bit older, I listened to the Goon Show. And that, I thought, like a lot of people of my age, we owned it. It was something our parents didn't quite understand, and nor did we, but we owned the show. We thought it was hysterically funny, whether we understood it or not.
So what part did it play in your life? Was it sort of part of the currency of the playground, that kind of thing? Would you speak to each other in those Goon voices?
Well, I was away at a boarding school, a prep school, and so we used to gather round at whatever time it was, 6:30 or something, in the sort of room which had a dilapidated snooker table in it and a ping pong table and various National Geographic magazines in the corner, and listen to a crackly old radio that they had. So it was very much a sort of, it was an audience event.
Was it a bit of a respite for the rigours of boarding school life?
Well, boarding school life is pretty weird anyway. I mean, it is quite surreal, like the Goon Show, I suppose. And we thought the kindred spirits were in the air. But I was always fascinated by radio. I wanted to be on the radio. My dad came back from the war. He'd liberated a microphone from somewhere and a wire, and I found a way to just plug it into some old radio set we had in the kitchen. And it was very, very low tech. You just had two wires and you put them in two holes, and that made the microphone work. So I was able to broadcast from my bedroom to my mum in the kitchen. But I never. And
do you remember what the content of those shows were? Were you doing Goon impressions, or were you writing your own material?
I never heard them. But later on, we got a tape recorder, and I used to do things on that, which again were probably a bit like the Goons. And I found the joys of making sound effects, do-it-yourself sound effects, and that was great fun. So, in a way, radio was my first sort of ambition and first love, and it's been a real joy to have been part of it, and especially over the years to have worked with a lot of the names who I heard, on Take It From Here or whatever it was that I heard then and got to work with later on.
Throughout the course of the evening, we're going to be listening to some of the material that's inspired you and the material that you have produced yourself over the years. We've talked about the Goons, so let's enter the world of the Goon Show for a moment and hear a clip from that.
That night, in the deepest dungeon of the Chateau d'If, two figures are at work. Oh, dropped it. Sapristi, look. Here it is. A black box. La box noire.
Yes. Lift it out and unroll it. Oh, just as I anticipated.
What?
I don't know what it is.
Wait. It's an old long-playing wax-cylinder gramophone record.
Then play it.
But there's no gramophone.
Well, we must dig for one.
Right. Got it.
Put it on.
It doesn't fit me at all.
Then play it.
Very well. Here goes.
This record is a clue to the treasure of Monte Cristo. Go to the prison yard where you will find wrapped up in brown paper parcels another prison. Reassemble it and you will find the treasure buried under the floor of cell number 626 in the basement.
Good.
Sapristi.
Come on, Moriarty, and we'll get...
Pipe! Dreadful news!
What?
Our holiday's over and somebody's stolen all the bricks of our prison. What's more, it was to sail home tomorrow with the tide. We're homeless.
Yes, and somebody's found out about the treasure.
Come on now. Who's hiding our prison?
The Goon Show's Tales of Old Dartmoor. So Graeme, if I had heard the tapes that you were making with your friends, would they have resembled that in any way?
They not very closely. That is great radio comedy. The idea of a prison in paper parcel to be reassembled and then you dig under the floor of the cell. And I think that what I learned from the Goons was that radio comedy isn't just people talking together and saying funny things to each other. It's conjuring up those pictures, and those pictures which gradually become more and more impossible in your mind as you try and sort of follow the logic. But I would have had a few of those sound effects, sort of chisels and falling rocks and rubble and things like that. And I found a way to make the noise of a horse and cart was to have a cardboard box full of marbles and roll them around. And then you sort of jingle something for the horse's harness. It was great fun to try and recreate the sort of things that I could hear on radio. And what fascinated me more than anything were the pictures that you could conjure up.
Do any of those tapes survive, or are they long lost?
No, I think they're long gone. Yeah, it's a shame, but I could remake some for you if you like.
Oh, why not? Yeah. You might still have the equipment, even if you don't have the recordings. So when you got to Cambridge and you started making your kind of first footsteps into the world of performing comedy with the Footlights, did you find that your compatriots in the Footlights had also been subject to these influences, that they had also loved the Goons and hated the Clitheroe Kid?
Some didn't like the Goons. Most did. I don't know anyone who liked the Clitheroe Kid, but yeah, we did have similar tastes. And by then, of course, we'd all been exposed to television. And while I was at Cambridge, that was when That Was the Week started, and the whole new sort of freewheeling satirical sketch type show appeared. But when I joined the Footlights, I was very nervous about doing what they were all doing, which was writing very witty sketches and performing them. And what I was doing at the time was sort of cartooning. So my act was to stand up with a big piece of paper and draw sort of cartoon faces on it, which then developed into other things, but it was very visual. So it was a long way from radio by then.
And were the pro and anti-Goon people, was that a serious factional division?
No, not really. I think it was something that you sort of find out much later. People pretended to like the Goons and then later on admitted they didn't really.
So did you carry any of that influence at that stage, or was it something that you were trying to kind of to reject or remake in some way?
What, the Goons?
Or anything that you'd heard, anything that nurtured you as a listener in your childhood and in your teens?
Oh yeah, yes. I mean, I wanted to be part of that world and to do the kind of sketches and the kind of comedy that I heard them doing. I didn't have a brand new sort of idea of how to do it. You know, you start off trying to imitate the good ones, and then gradually develop your own style as time goes on.
I've been trying to kind of go through the BBC records to find out when you made your first appearance on radio, and it is, I think, on a program, a documentary about the Footlights from 1964 that Brian Matthew presented. Yeah. On the home service, which I think, as far as the record shows, is the first time the voice of Graeme Garden was heard on the wireless.
Yeah, not much of it. I remember being quite sort of tongue-tied and overawed by the experience. But yeah, I bet that is the first time I was ever on the air. I don't think it was my funniest performance by any means.
Was it something live in the studio then?
It was a live chat, and we all were ushered in and sat round the table as one does with microphones. And I think there were about 4 of us from the team who were being interviewed. So Brian Matthew could hop from one to the other rapidly as we stumbled out our pathetic responses.
And how did you find the radio environment as a performer? Because of course the first radio show that you were involved with as a writer and a performer was I'm sorry, I'll read that again, billed in its first show on the 4th of October 1965 as A New Kind of Laughing, with Tim Brooke-Taylor, Graeme Garden, David Hatch, Joe Kendall and Bill Oddie. Yeah.
Well, that was fascinating because in the Footlights we'd done shows on stage and sort of taken it on tour and things. And so doing the radio recording was in a theatre. It was in the Playhouse Theatre in Charing Cross, which is a lovely big old theatre, and we had a lovely audience. And there were the BBC microphones at the front of the stage, and you had to, go and speak into those. And you're allowed to go and sit down between sketches. And there was a live band on stage who behind us playing brilliant music and then reading the newspaper during the sketches. So it was the theatrical side of it we were kind of used to, but the technical bit we weren't. But radio is much less technical than television, obviously, and so there's much less between you and your audience. You're much more directly involved with them, which is great.
How did you work out what was funny on the radio?
Usually whether the audience laughed, but but when you're writing it, you kind of think, well, I mean, I think things are funny maybe twice, once when you write them and once when the audience laugh, and in between it's an act of faith. And it's impossible to convince somebody something is funny if they don't think it is. You know, if you show it to the producer and he says, I don't think that's funny, then throw it away, because there's no point in arguing about it, because it's not an intellectual thing at all. So I guess I would write things, if it made me chuckle as I was writing it, which sometimes it would, or I would think, yeah, that's the way that joke works, and technically it's funny. But really, you have to run it past somebody else and, you know, make sure that it works, that people don't sort of look puzzled and say, why would you think that's funny? And you have to explain, which is not a luxury that you have in front of an audience.
But it sounds like, from what you're saying, that you might have to know whether something is funny is something that somebody else has to tell you, that you don't, you know, you don't know it in your heart, as it were, when you're writing, they're going to love this.
Well, yeah, there are some things that you just know are funny, and there are other things where you think, will I get away with this?
Yeah.
You know, so there are some things I would say, and luckily, on the whole, I really had to fight my case for putting on something that I thought was funny and somebody else didn't. Usually, if they didn't like it, they were usually right, and it could be improved, because there's always that option as well. You know, if you rewrite something, I always think if you cut something, make something shorter, you should make it better as well, and not just take out a bit of dead wood, but make something extra happen.
Well, let's hear something that definitely passed that test. Let's hear a clip from I'm Sorry, I'll Read That Again.
Then, as a young man, you set yourself up in the bread pudding industry. Until today, I suppose it could be true to say that you are the man who put bread pudding on the map.
Yes, I did. But I'll clean it off again as soon as I can.
Sir Ruddy, you are now an extremely rich man, yet how much money do you have in your wallet at this moment?
Let's see, I have £2.10.
And is that all you have with you?
No, I've got some silver in my trouser pocket, £3 million.
I see, so that explains your unusual habit of wearing your trousers down round your ankles.
Well, it's not so much the weight of the money as the 4 security guards I've got in there to watch it. Ouch!
Oh, what's wrong?
They're brewing up tea again. It's all right, it'll pass off.
And finally, if you were to meet a young man setting off down life's long and arduous highway, what would you say to him?
Bye-bye!
So that's the character of Sir Roddy Shame.
Yeah. That was me doing my best Peter Sellers voice there, I think.
It's good. It's almost, tell you what, that is almost unrecognizable as you, I think. It's an absolute vocal transformation.
I was very young at the time, you know. No, that's a good example of the pictures that the radio is presenting, because the picture of this man and his trousers gets more and more bizarre as the sketch goes on.
What was going on in your life while you were doing this? Because you were still in the thick of your medical training whilst you were, well, in the early years at least of.
Yes, I'm sorry I read that again. I was a medical student for most of those years, and we recorded on a Sunday, which was a free day for me, so that was fine. And then during the week, I would find time to scribble the scripts and ideas. And you know, after the first couple of series or so, Bill Oddie and I were writing almost all of the script. Bill used to write 2 songs every week as well, which was extraordinary. That was doable. It was hard work. There was one series I didn't do. I couldn't appear in because I was down in Plymouth doing midwifery, delivering babies, and I was trying to write for the show as well, but that proved difficult because the Ark Royal had been in port 9 months before, and so we were kept fairly busy. I think some of the scripts I sent in were rewritten, shall we say, by Bill when they got there. And no, that was the most difficult time. But otherwise, yeah, I was a medical student for most of those years.
And what did that impose upon you? Because I'm thinking that everybody else in that gang would have been, very much part of a scene. They'd be seeing each other during the week. They'd be doing other sorts of work, and they'd be doing the show on a Sunday. But you're slightly away from everything and out of it. You were a bit between two worlds. I
was, yeah. I mean, we used to sort of get together a bit socially, but I was very much in a different world to the rest of them during that time. Yeah, absolutely. And but it seemed to work all right. And then Bill and I went on writing together and working on other things. And it was. Looking back, it was quite a mad sort of time to be to attempt to do that, to study medicine and write comedy at the same time. But there's a rich sort of seam of comedy going through medicine. Doctors are very funny people, and people who are not funny enough to be doctors get kicked out and have to work in show business. So.
It's not just this, is it? Because you're obviously in this period in the late 60s, you're doing your first television work, and also there's other work that you're doing as well, guesting on other people's radio programs, and you had a long association with Frank Muir, part of that gang on Frank Muir Goes Into. Where did you find the time for it?
Well, I mean, I stopped being a medical student eventually, so the time eased off a little bit. And Eric Idle and I shared a flat in London, and we were doing our sort of bits and pieces. And I had a job lined up for my first medical job as a houseman, as they call them. And at the same time, Tony Palmer came up with the idea of a TV series, which Bill and I could do with him, called Twice a Fortnight. And we were offered this. The idea was to do a sort of, I'm sorry, I'll read that again, on television. And I thought, well, I can put off the medical career for 6 months because I'm never going to get another television offer, and I'll never know what it was like. So I did that and put off the medical thing for 6 months, and then that turned into another 6 months, and I'm still putting it off. Theoretically, I suppose I could go back.
And how do you look back now on, I'm sorry, I'll read that again? What sort of place do you see it occupying the history of British comedy? Because I think that, listening to it now, I can hear the influences of that contemporary moment, the Footlights vibe it's got, but it also looks back to sort of vaudeville forms, that kind of slightly self-conscious joke telling, where you both you're telling the joke, but you're also sending up the idea of telling the joke.
It was made at a time just after Peter Cook and Co. had arrived on the scene, and Satire had hit the TV screens, and that was the week and things like that. And everything was assumed to be satirical, and it was this undergraduate satirical humour. And we wanted to do silly humour, as you say, looking back at the sort of Goon type show things. And so it was back to music hall was the sort of attitude. And that's why we used to do very old jokes very occasionally. And I learnt that, in fact, don't assume that your audience haven't heard a very old joke. Sometimes you would do a very old joke and they'd hoot with laughter because they'd never heard it before. So we were, yes, absolutely looking back to, the history of radio comedy as well as sort of, vaudeville and music hall comedy, and finding the silliness in life. It occasionally turned into satirical stuff as well. And the Goodies eventually became very satirical, but it was always very silly.
Before we leave, I'm sorry, I'll read that again. I think we should hear another clip, and this is something from the 25th anniversary episode.
Oh.
In order to save the world, we're going to have to recycle old radio programmes.
What, again?
Get me the dynamic new head of radio comedy.
He's already here.
Arnold Totteridge.
How do you do? I'm the dynamic new dynamic new head of radio. I'm the dynamic new head of radio. Head of dynamic. What was I trying to say?
You're trying to say I'm head of radio comedy.
So am I.
Right. Now, I want to recycle a load of tired old jokes and clapped-out routines. But where am I going to find them?
Don't ask me. You're head of radio comedy.
God.
No, wait. I've got it. It's easy, the answer. I'm sorry. Read that. Easy. It's easy. I'm sorry. What was the question?
Of course. Anyway, that's it. We'll recycle the Clitheroe Kid.
And call it the Crankies.
Yes, of course. Brilliant. The Clitheroe Kid. I'm sorry. I'll read that again.
What did you say?
Oh, that's going back a bit. I said, how do you do? I'm the dynamic new I'm not boring you, am I?
I'm sorry, I'll read that again. That's what we'll recycle.
You mean the old team working together?
Well, there's a first time for everything.
The 25th anniversary episode of I'm Sorry, I'll Read That Again. A bit of history showing there, isn't there? Because you get your dislike of the Clitheroe Kid.
Yes.
Rather kind of, dig at the Crankies as well, who would then come into orbit. And I think, not wrong to observe a kind of overlap between those two acts. And Arnold Totteridge.
Yes.
The ghost of Henry Crun, I think, haunting Arnold Totteridge very, very slightly.
Yes, there could be a bit. It was... I don't know why I came up with a character, but it was somebody who got trapped into various circular speech patterns because he couldn't pass the syllable do without turning it into how do you do. And I think I must have seen a patient with something similar to that.
Oh, it does sound, yes. So this is your kind of Oliver Sacks.
And I think probably it is the Oliver Sacks moment of comedy, yes.
Did you ever? Is that one of your secrets, Graeme? If we went back over the records of your patients from those days, would we see some of their eccentricities being represented?
I think you might, but more likely some of the doctors, but it will be, yeah.
And of course, not so long ago, very recently, I think it was the last live event of the most recent Slapstick Festival, was a kind of revival of I'm Sorry, I'll Read That Again.
Indeed, yes. Barnaby Eaton-Jones, the chap who has revived the scripts that Bill and I wrote all those years ago and cobbled them together into a very serviceable script for doing on stage and recreating the atmosphere. They've got a band on stage and they've got the microphones, they all dress up, and it's rather a joyful occasion. So and the very last one that we did with them at the Slapstick Festival, Tim and Bill and I were all on stage doing it with them.
And how did you find that?
Sorry, how did I find it?
Yes, what was it like as an experience?
It was extraordinary. It was very nice to do the little bit that we were allowed to do, and I was sort of champing at the bit, thinking, "Well, I would come on and do a bit more later on. It'd be good." But no, that was a very sort of very jolly experience, and what was nice was the lovely warmth coming from the audience, who obviously had very fond memories of it and appreciated what was going on.
I suppose one of the reasons why I'm Sorry, I'll Read That Again had to come to an end was because you were doing so much television and there simply wasn't time to do it. Everybody was kind of everybody had their own TV show, didn't they?
They did, and Bill and I in particular were writing Doctor in the House for London Weekend, and we just didn't really have the time, and starting on the goodies as well. And radio is no easier to write than television, and obviously is paid a great deal less for reasons which escape me, really. But we thought the BBC wanted to go on with I'm Sorry, I Read That Again, and we just couldn't see how we could sort of fit it in. And so I did a show with Giles Brandreth called A Rhyme in Time, which was a panel game. And there was a bizarre sort of setup. There was June Whitfield and, who was it on the other side? I'll remember in a minute. But me and Carol Brahms were the other team. Cyril Fletcher with June Whitfield, and me and Carol Brahms. And it was a literary quiz of some sort. And I thought, well, this is the way to do it. You just get people along and get them to do something silly, and they'll be funny, and you don't have to write a script for them. So I suggested doing I'm Sorry, Read That Again like that. So without a script, but just give people silly games. And it turned into I'm Sorry, I Haven't a Clue. And we did a pilot. Everybody said never again. It was a traumatic experience. David Hatch said, don't worry, they'll put it out on Boxing Day when everyone's pissed and nobody will hear it. And the head of Radio 4 heard it and wanted a series, much to our amazement and dismay, I have to say, to some extent.
Dismay? Why dismay?
Well, we'd all hated the pilot so much. We felt really quite embarrassed by it. But we did a series, and at the end of the series, we said never again. And in fact, right until, our very last series with Humphrey, we always joined the series by saying never again.
I want to kind of park, I'm Sorry, I Haven't a Clue, just for a moment, because I want to explore a few other things first, because you were working in the 70s. I mean, you've mentioned A Rhyme in Time, but there are other radio shows, panel shows that you were part of as well. There was one with Isabel Barnett, devised by Ian Messiter, and with Steve Race chaired that one. And there was a kind of musical element to that as well. And that was called, the name is I haven't put the title down in my notes. This is the quiz element, Graeme.
Yes,
what was that show called? It's got an ellipsis in the title. So there are people shouting at us now.
Many a slip.
Many a slip. Twixt Isabel Barnett, Eleanor Summerfield, Richard Murdoch, and Graeme Garden.
That's right. Well, I mean, it was a thrill to work with Richard Murdoch, who had been part of my childhood, Much Binding in the Marsh and all that.
Yeah.
That was, I did a few of those. I don't think I was quite so regular on it, but that was fun. I did, and Just a Minute, I did a couple of those, and Ian Messiter had me out for lunch beforehand and explained how the show worked. But yes, it was. Yes, there was a lot of. I mean, I'm Sorry, I Haven't a Clue. In a sense, was billed as the antidote to panel games, and it was panel games like Ian Messiter's that it was the antidote to.
They were the toxin. Yeah,
if you like, yes. And I think nowadays it's almost the template for panel games. Most panel games are sort of rather like Clue, rather like Many a Slip, which was terribly polite.
But I'm interested in your participation in those, even if they're not something that you might remember they're not something that's particularly stayed in the memory, and maybe there's a slightly kind of archaic quality to them. Maybe they're a little bit mannered or a little bit, I don't know. But they are a place where there's a kind of intergenerational meeting, and you were working with people who are much older than you and who represent older traditions. I mean, as you mentioned, Richard Murdoch. But when you, for instance, if you were guesting on Just a Minute, then that links you into that other world, doesn't it? The Kenneth Williams sort of world, which isn't presumably is not one that you've had a great deal of interaction with in any other form.
No, it was literally just that kind of a show, and one or two television things I did with him as well. But certainly not part of his, sketch type shows. But it was, yes, it was very interesting, meeting a lot of these names who I'd heard on the radio. We probably sent up on, I'm sorry, I'll read that again.
Yeah.
Finding that you were sitting next to Lady Isabel Barnett.
Yes.
And doing these shows. And there were a lot of shows like 20 Questions and, What's My Line on TV, which were very sort of after dinner, polite, everybody smoking away. Gilbert Harding being grumpy. But so those were the things, I suppose, that were the toxin to which we were the antidote.
But that instinct to send up radio as well as participate in it has stayed with you, hasn't it? Because I'm thinking of the series Do Go On, which is moving ahead a bit, but that was a parody of the radio discussion program. And, I want to say I don't take any of it personally, but it is there is something worth sending up there, isn't there?
Well, yes, I mean, it was Griff Rhys-Jones played this radio host who would have 3 or 4 guests on each week and interview them, and they all had an interesting angle to talk about. But he always had an agenda, and it was, his had a sort of way through the program which really the guests bounced off him and didn't make much sort of impression at all. But that was good fun to do, and it was we sent up not just the radio show but also some of the characters that they have on these shows. And it was good fun. I played some of the guests.
Yes. Another contribution of yours that I think has been slightly dropped from the cultural memory is your involvement with Weekending. The immensely long-running Radio 4 Friday night satire show. Now, were you part of you were right in there right at the beginning there?
No, it wasn't. It was. It had been running for a while, and they decided to ask me to come in as a sort of host. Yeah. Of the show. So I was on every week, doing the introductions and introduction to the sketches and the commentary and things. And that was quite interesting because that was sort of seat of the pants stuff because people, scripts were coming in at the last minute. And I remember one day Kenny Everett was sacked from the BBC, and we obviously needed to mention it on the show that night. So I wrote a thing, and the BBC were trying to sort of downplay it. So I wrote this thing where when anybody tried to announce the fact that Kenny Everett had been fired by the BBC, the studio doors burst open and these heavies came in and beat them up and silenced them. And this went on about 3 or 4 times during the show. And at the end of it, the producer was a little bit worried about whether it was acceptable, and got the head of comedy to come and listen to it, who said he wasn't sure either, and then got the head of Radio 4 to come. Eventually Ludovic Kennedy, Alistair, what was his name?
Mill?
No.
DG?
No, it was Ian Trethowan, who had actually sacked Everett that morning. He came down and listened to it and said that he thought it was acceptable because it was sending up the BBC and not sending up Everett, and kicking a man when he was down, which I thought was very sporting of him, having sacked the man that morning. But that was interesting. It was not, I think, my finest hour.
Well, I think we should. We've mentioned the goodies, of course, as a mammoth, gargantuan television series. But you've also mentioned Barnum Eaton Jones and the revival of I'm Sorry, I'll Read That Again. So one thing we might note is the what will now, I suppose, be in rather like the last Goon Show of all, the great Goon Show album, the return of the goodies to audio very recently. So let's hear a clip of that, please.
Yeah.
This is a chase, isn't it? We're very good at chase sequences, remember?
Bill, that was 4 decades ago.
Yeah, Tim's right. We're not getting any younger. We've got no choice. We'll have to use stunt doubles.
Brilliant.
Stunt doubles.
The stuntmen who look exactly like us in every detail from behind.
On your way, stunt goodies. We'll take over at the other end.
Oh, look at them go. Remember when we could do that?
We could never do that, Tim. They used to speed up the film.
Oh, yes. Still off they go, heading towards the Shard, and now they're taking a left at...
You clot. We don't need to describe what they're doing because we can all see it.
But the listeners can't, Bill.
Ah, yes. Then we'll use an old radio trick. Find a couple of bystanders and explain what's going on to them. Hello, you're a pair of bystanders, aren't you?
Yes.
Who are those three prats on a bike, then?
They're the goodies.
Oh, yes, they look just like them.
From behind. Where are they off to, then?
They're heading for Big Ben.
Big Ben? They want to turn right at the Gherkin.
Yeah, that's it. Then turn left at the Tower of London.
Oh, look, they're going straight past St Paul's.
Over Tower Bridge.
They should have waited for it to close, mind.
We need to fish the stunt goodies out of the river. Come on, you two. Right, here we are.
Where are we?
Yes, why have you brought me and my wife to the side of the river to see the stunt doubles of 3 comedians we weren't that big fans of?
Not you two, the other two.
Oh!
Yeah, that's better. Bill, dive in and get the Trandom out of the Thames.
Why does it always have to be me?
Because we've only got a sound effect of you diving into a river.
Oh, all right. I'll go in and I'll get the bike. You wait here, Wiggy. Good. Got the bike.
Well done. Now we'll be at Big Ben in no time. Three for the open-top bus tour, please.
And 1 Trandom.
That'll be £30, please.
There you go.
Each?
Do you take plastic?
Of course.
Here's a single-use carrier bag.
That'll do nicely. Take a seat.
The goodies return to audio there. I think we can hear all the principles of radio comedy that you described very early in our conversation at work.
Yes, the pictures. And the idea of using stunt doubles on radio. I've always found that rather appealing. You should try it sometime.
Yes. And was it good to be back on those 3 saddles, even if you were only pretending to be on the saddles?
Well, I tell you, it was as if I'd been in the saddle because I got incredibly painful back on the day of the recording and I couldn't do it. I had to call off my appearance on the show. So Barnaby Eaton Jones read my part in front of the audience, and then Dirk Maggs, the producer, came out to my home some weeks later, and we recorded my bits, and you heard them edited back in there through the miracle of radio editing and the miracle of Dirk Maggs, who's a wonderful producer. Mm-hmm. So it was. I was very disappointed not to be able to get in front of an audience with it because I thought that would have been really good fun, and it was.
There were stunt goodies as well. I mean, it's
yeah.
The
yes.
layer upon layer there.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the birth of I'm Sorry, I Haven't a Clue, and it's mutation, I suppose, is what we should talk about over the years, because it has changed, hasn't it, since that first series? The tone of it has changed. The music has changed. Colin Sell wasn't there at the beginning.
No.
The nature, the formula of the antidote has not remained the same over the years, has it?
No, it hasn't. And I think in the early days it was much more dangerous in terms of the chances of being embarrassed rather than being entertaining for the audience. What has happened over the years is that producers have put in their input and refined things. And when Geoffrey Perkins was the producer, we introduced Mornington Crescent, which was an old game that used to be played by out-of-work actors in the Jerry's Bar in London. And then John Naismith, who's been producing it for the last 20-odd years, has really sort of taken the reins and made sure that it has a safety net at every corner, as it were. There are still things that are loose, and we don't always know what everyone else is going to say, but we all tend to have an idea of what we are going to do on the show. And the idea is to make the other people in the show laugh and for everyone to have a good time. We're a very supportive show to do as well. A lot of people have been nervous about coming on the show. And then once they come on it, they realise that, you know, nobody goes home hurt. we make sure that the jokes are shared out equally, and you know, if somebody is a bit light on a particular round, then you know, somebody else will give them a gag or two.
And are you kind to newcomers who maybe aren't so familiar with the rules of Mornington Crescent as you?
No, we're quite strict with them.
Yeah,
we're quite. We did a show once, which was Pro-Am Mornington Crescent, where we had the Alec Guinness played Mornington Crescent with the teams, and unfortunately Mornington Crescent was called just before his turn, so he never spoke.
I can hear it. I can hear it in his voice. I can hear it.
But yeah, one of my favourite rounds was Celebrity What's My Line? We had Judi Dench who came on, and we had to guess what she did for a living.
I think we should hear a clip from. I'm sorry, I haven't a clue. We'll hear one or two from this, but first we're going to hear some nursery rhymes.
Right.
Now to a round which takes as its subject those delightful rhymes we were all taught in the nursery. Though many of these rhymes may appear to us today as little more than nonsense, they are in fact full of useful tips for the age in which they were written. One such rhyme, for example, is a stern warning against the consequences of placing sleeping babies in the upper branches of trees during windy weather. Another paints a disturbing picture of domestic life in a shoe for a single parent with too many children. Teams, I'd like you please to suggest some suitable amendments to well-known nursery rhymes to make them more relevant to life as we know it today. Barry.
Hickory dickory dock, the mouse ran up the clock. The clock struck and the mouse came out in sympathy.
Willie.
Well, Mother Hubbard went to the cupboard to get a poor dog a bone. When she got there, the cupboard was bare, so she fitted a mobile phone.
The modern version of that would be Mother Teresa went to the freezer.
Graeme, have you got anything to say?
Yes, I have, Humphrey.
Oh, good.
There was a crooked man, and he walked a crooked mile. He found a crooked sixpence against a crooked stile. He bought a crooked cat, which caught a crooked mouse, and they all lived together till he fell off his yacht.
Simple Simon wore a Walkman going to the fair. Said Simple Simon to the pieman, "What?"
That was great. The role of the chairman is something that's changed a lot over the years. Tell us about your sense of how Humphrey Lyttelton grew into that role and how big it became, really.
Well, to begin with, Humph was like the chairman of the sort of 20 Questions, and was very straight and very posh, and did his job, and it was all very efficient, and that was fine. And it was later that his own natural, I think, probably disdain for the programme began to seep into his performance. And we capitalised on that, and they used to, eventually, certainly when Ian Pattinson was brought in as a writer who did the links and the opening little monologue about, because we take the show on tour, we were at a different venue every couple of weeks, and so Ian would write a little gazetteer of the place that we visited, and Humph became very enamoured of doing those. And so all that turned it into a very different job for him, which was to be quite naturally for him remote from the proceedings that were going on, and not to in any way approve of or even understand the show that was being recorded in front of him, but just to read out what he was given, and if Samantha was otherwise engaged, to explain to the audience what she was up to, and that was that. And that was, that's where Humph was. I mean, he was a big, tall, ex-guards officer, old Etonian jazz trumpeter, totally unlike the rest of us in every way. It was very funny. And then Jack Dee, who took over, has, without imitating Humph in any way, has maintained that sense of total disapproval of the show and of the incompetence of the people playing the games, and has very much made it his own.
But that dismayed tone that was honed so precisely by Humphrey Lyttelton over those years, are you really telling me that was real?
There was an element of it. If you read his autobiography, he explains about his experience as the pilot. He was offered the pilot of Clue, and he said he was always being offered pilots, and he said he always said yes because you just turn up and you do it. It's rubbish, and you never hear any more about it, and you go home with a check in your pocket. And he was somewhat dismayed when it turned into a series. So I think there was an element of Humph that sort of really didn't really sort of think it was his best. I mean, he did so much terrific stuff that he ought to have been much more famous for than Clue, and yet Clue was the thing that I think more people knew him from in the end.
And yet he was clearly happy to have that sent up, wasn't it? Because the running gag about Bad Penny Blues was always something that he was clearly participating in, wasn't it? That wasn't a joke that he minded, was it?
No, he enjoyed that. But and he used to play the trumpet occasionally on the tours that we did. He would close the show with his trumpet, not a dry eye in the house.
And what's your sense of how the relationship between Clue and its audience has developed? Was there a moment when you felt, right, this has gone from being something a bit wobbly and uncertain to something that's successful to something that actually is a kind of way of life or a cult in the way that those programs that you listened to as a child were?
I think there wasn't a moment, but there was definitely that realization over the years, because in the early days we did Clue and it was a bit of an imposition sometimes, you think, oh, well, that's ruined my weekend, I've got a show to do. It became sort of more and more enjoyable as time went on, and then we started enjoying it, then noticing that the audience it was really when we started going on the road. When we were doing it in London, it would always be at the Paris Theatre, or usually at the Paris Theatre. And you tended to get a very similar audience who would come every week, some of them identical, and the same people would turn up week after week. And that was fine, but it was a small theatre, and it was a sort of, average sort of audience, and a decent response from them. But when we took it on the road and went to various big theatres around the country, we got a huge response and sold out the theatres, and realised that people were really grateful to see us, very grateful for us to have come out of London and taken the show to them. And we sort of realised that there was this enthusiasm and warmth towards the show out all over the place. And it also gave us the ability to do all those silly jokes about the town that we were visiting. So that was really the moment that we realised that, I suppose, that it had become more than just an enjoyable show, and that it got a decent audience on the air. It was something that, people were... In Cheltenham, one particular occasion, they had to call the police because at that time the tickets were free, and the ticket unit was working on the old assumption you give away half as many tickets again as there are seats, because a lot of people won't turn up with free tickets, but they did. And there were people who had travelled down and booked hotels and were being turned away at the theatre, and they had to call the police because they were getting ugly. So the BBC said, well, you'll have to charge for tickets, which we now do, which means that every ticket has a seat allocated. And so people, if it's sold out, people know it's sold out and they can't get in. And the BBC give us a lot of grief about that and say we shouldn't really be charging people for the privilege of sitting through a radio show they've already paid for, which they haven't, of course, because you don't pay for the radio license. But never mind. So it is continues to be a delight. And when all this Corona nonsense is over, it'll be nice to get back on the road again.
Yes, please. And in the meantime, let's hear another clip from I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue. And this is Critics Forum, where I think your critical dexterity is being tested. Let's hear the clip.
Right, we have a round called Critics Forum, or Against 'em. It's a new round in which each team play the part of two critics reviewing a play or film. When the other team buzz, the critics must totally change their opinion. I'll give a long buzz, which will go like that, when the whole thing's gone on long enough. Now, Barry and Graeme, will you please discuss Neighbours?
We've been watching Neighbours this week, I think, panel, haven't we?
Yes, regularly, and may I say what a very true-to-life and somehow real programme it fails to be. I would particularly take issue, I think, with Kylie Minogue, wouldn't you?
I would gladly take issue with Kylie Minogue. When one remembers... Because taking issue with her, I would be able to discuss the very ethnic feel it has. I feel I'm there. I feel I'm one of the family. I feel I'm there. And yet, I've never liked my family. And immediately feel alienated. Quentin.
Well, Quentin isn't here, so I'll carry on. No, Quentin is here. But I'll carry on anyway, because I think... I've forgotten if we're for or against now.
I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue, sending up the Radio 3 programme Critics Forum there that Philip French used to present.
Nobody's safe.
So we need to bring things right up to date, I think, and talk about the unbelievable truth. Extremely successful radio panel game that you devised. It's not the first time you devised a panel game that relies on that's about the detection of truth or lies. It's sort of a bit of a theme, really, isn't it, in your career? But tell me about this one and how you go about devising a format like this and testing it.
Well, John Naismith and I have a production company, and we produce The Unbelievable Truth, and we were looking for ideas to do, and John said there are all these books about facts that you can get, 1,000 amazing facts. Why don't we do something based on that? And his original idea was that you get somebody to read out a little talk about a topic which is full of unbelievable facts, but you put 5 lies in with them. And I said, well, that's going to be impossible to research, to find something that is amusing enough to do the whole talk with unbelievable truths in it, and then then write 5 lies. Why don't we make the whole thing a pack of lies, and then find 5 little truths that you can hide in it? So we did it that way around. And that's, simply speaking, that's how it works. And, people interrupt, and if they spot a truth, and they get marked or lose marks if they're right or wrong. And it's very simple. And we've just done a series with people joining in from home without an audience. And it does work without an audience because it is that kind of a game. We're going back to the toxic games that we tried to find an antidote to. And it is a game where people, when we had an audience in the studio, sometimes the jokes would go for nothing because the audience were listening too carefully to try and find out, is that true or false, and what's coming up next. So that's worked really nicely, and I think that's very interesting. We'll probably go back to doing it with an audience. Clue, I think we would struggle to do with an audience.
It's not quite the same thing, but really, Unbelievable Truth is working really well as a kind of lockdown program, partly because I suppose it's the kind of thing, it's like an elaborate version of the kind of things that we were all trying to do to entertain each other. During lockdown, there's something rather lovely about hearing all these panelists who we know so well laughing in their bedrooms.
Yes,
almost like this is their mechanism for getting through all this stuff.
Yeah, that is a very nice atmosphere. The Clue atmosphere is of a big theatre full of people all laughing at jokes, and I think without the audience, to be honest, some of the jokes on Clue might be rather exposed. Don't you think? They may wilt. But the Unbelievable Truth has been great fun to do, and a lot of great names have come and done it, and people like Henning Vane, who a lot of people had never heard of when he started doing it, has become a cult hero on the show.
So he's so funny, and one of course the advantages of being the deviser and the producer of this game is that you can appear on it yourself
and win.
So let's hear a clip of you mainly lying on The Unbelievable Truth.
Graeme, your subject is advertising, a form of public communication intended to draw attention to a product, service or event. Off you go, Graeme.
Among the well-known phrases that originated in ads are "no news is good news," which first appeared in a campaign showing how the Sun differs from other papers. "Put some lead in your pencil" was coined by the Keswick Graphite Company, and the phrase "always a bridesmaid but never a bride" comes from an advert for Listerine mouthwash. "Go to work on an egg" was a slogan invented by a budding young writer called Charlotte Bronte. Although her follow-up, "Get your laughing gear around a sausage," didn't catch on.
Catherine.
I feel like some of that's got to be true. Is "always a bridesmaid, never a bride," was that a Listerine advert?
Yes, it was. Well done.
I'm familiar with that saying.
Yes, the advert first featured in the Ladies' Home Journal in 1924, with the slogan appearing next to a picture of a forlorn woman called Edna, who was unable to find love because of her bad breath. Listerine was originally sold as a floor cleaner and a cure for gonorrhea.
Have you ever been hurt at work and it wasn't your fault? Me too, get over it.
That's you on The Unbelievable Truth. Something very clever going on there, I think. Your joke about Charlotte Bronte devising "go to work on an egg" is like a joke about that well-known piece of trivia that Fay Weldon wrote. That slogan. Very.
You can hear the fingers hovering over the buzzer. I think Fay Weldon's coming up.
So, if I'm sorry I haven't a clue, was the antidote to A Rhyme in Time. Is the unbelievable truth an antidote to QI?
We have our little run-ins with QI.
Yes.
There are several facts that both QI have mentioned, which we've said are not true, and that we've mentioned, which QI have queried. We had a QI version of the game where Alan Davies and Stephen Fry were on the teams, and Alan had a lecture which I'd written for him, and he smuggled all his truths past the opposition, and there were several sort of elephant traps that Stephen jumped straight into as well. So it was a very satisfactory moment.
I think it's probably time that we let some of the audience ask some questions of you. I'm getting them coming in on my laser display board here. So I'm going to kind of give you some of those. And I don't know. I've not got names here, so these questions hang anonymously. But I'm asked: has there been any decision made about the future of I'm Sorry, I Haven't a Clue?
At the moment, as far as I know, it will go ahead when we've figured out a way of doing it, either back in big theatres or if there is some way of doing it without an audience. We're, talking about doing that, but as far as I know, yes, it will go ahead.
And I'm also asked, when might we hear Tim's last work on Clue from a recording made in Huddersfield? There's an episode of his that has yet to be aired.
There are two that he recorded just before he got ill, and very sadly died. We decided not to broadcast. There was a series coming up, and we decided not to broadcast them in this series because it was just, too fresh. We would like them to be broadcast. He's very funny in them, and they're good shows. And I think in a year's time we'll put them out.
I would like to hear an evening on Radio 4 devoted just to Tim's singing really inappropriately young and filthy songs on Just a Minute. Has there? Oh, I'm asked. How much do you think you've changed the world, Graeme? Whoever posts this question says that they can't imagine life without you.
Oh, right. Well, I suppose that's one way. I don't know that I've changed the world all that much. I think
some of the people listening to this may disagree with you there.
Well, I can't think of a single thing that I've done which will have a lasting footprint on history.
Well, that's perhaps a question for the audience rather than for you.
Yeah,
and if you have any more questions,
audience, indeed.
Well, audience, if you want to put something, Graeme, you can put the question into the YouTube chat, and it will be relayed to me. How do you keep up, I'm asked, with the ever youthful Barry Cryer?
Well, he's slowed down a bit now, of course. But yes, Barry is wonderful. He did break his leg a couple of years ago, and that did take him out of action for a little while. He's back though, raring to go, and he phones me up every now and again, and we have a chat. He loves an audience. I mean, he's lost without one. When he broke his leg, they very thoughtfully put him into a private room in the hospital, but he demanded he was back in the ward because there's nobody to tell jokes to.
He is fantastic, isn't
Yeah.
he? He's like everybody's favorite uncle, isn't he, Barry?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm asked, do you think the BBC might allow The Unbelievable Truth to be recorded in theatres around the country like Clue is? Would you like to take The Unbelievable Truth on tour?
We would, and it is a very popular show, and we do have problems with the audience turning up and not being able to get seats because it's a free ticket situation again. Whether we could come to some arrangement, I mean, going around the country, we do it adds to the budget considerably, and by charging for tickets, we used to be able to sort of pay for our accommodation and things, but I think the BBC have found some way of saying that looks as if the BBC is making a profit out of it, and so I don't understand all this finance and stuff, but it would be good fun to do. The Unbelievable Truth. We've taken it up to Edinburgh to the festival in the past, and so I think the odd occasion like that we'll try and keep on doing.
What's your favourite game on I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue?
I think my favourite is Sound Charades, actually, because it's a chance to do a little bit of performing and, a bit of the old sketch writing again. And, of course, it gives us a chance to do Hamish and Dougal.
Oh, of course, yes. Yeah. What radio comedy show, I'm asked, has had the most influence upon you? I mean, is it one we've already mentioned, or are there others that spring to mind?
I suppose it has to be the Goon Show, because it opened my eyes to what you could do and what you could, get away with, and what you could put into the audience's minds and their inner eyes. So I guess that was the one that sparked it all off. Yeah.
I'm asked, when you started I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue, how much did you enjoy improv as opposed to the writing that you clearly enjoy? You talked about your feeling of dismay after the first series and a feeling of fear, perhaps, about it too. But did you learn to enjoy that element of improvisation?
I enjoyed it more than others to some extent, and I still quite enjoy the improvised rounds when we can get away with them. But it depends who's on the show, and very often, you'll find that the group would rather have something a little bit more structured than completely freewheeling. But we still have rounds like the Cheddar Gorge rounds, where we do one word alternately, which are always good fun.
Our time is nearly up. I think I've got time to ask you one more from the feed here, and it's a good one. Mr. Garden has made us laugh so much. What makes Mr. Garden laugh? It's a very deferent question, this.
Gosh, yes, it is. All sorts of things. There are some things that you would expect me to laugh at. John Finnemore, almost anything that he does makes me laugh. There are some things that even surprise me that I laugh at, like Mrs. Brown's Boys, which, for all its disadvantages, is very, very funny. I love the interplay on Would I Lie to You between David Mitchell and Lee Mack, and also the surprising interplay with some of the other people who come on there, who are, surprisingly funny or expectedly very funny. Bob Mortimer just greases me up, extraordinary. An awful lot, and there is an enormous amount of comedy around, and we're all very lucky to have it.
Well, we'll be very lucky to have you too, not just for this evening, but for all the decades before it. We're nearly out of time. We've got one last clip of I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue to hear, and I need to tell everybody that for the next few Fridays there are going to be more events on YouTube from the Slapstick Festival. You'll be able to hear David Robinson, the Chaplin biographer, talking to Robin Ince about Chaplin on the 21st of August. Lucy Porter is hosting an online quiz on the 28th, and you'll also be able to see archive of my conversation with Little and Large at the Bristol Old Vic, recorded at a recent festival. We also want to remind you that this conversation between me and Graeme will be on YouTube for the next 2 weeks, giving you many opportunities to press that donate button and keep that festival going. We want to thank John Naismith and Barnaby Eaton-Jones for supplying us very kindly with all the clips that you've heard this evening. We're going to hear one more, but before we do that, everybody now is joining me to thank you, Graeme Garden, for being our guest on this Slapstick conversation. Thank you so much, Graeme. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in tonight.
Thank you. Bye.
Our next round is a musical one in which I'd like you teams to intone the lyrical refrain of one particular vocal composition while simultaneously pursuing the melodic line of a dissimilar piece. In other words, one song to the tune of another. You can use Colin Sell if you think it'll be of any help. You might even ask him to accompany you on the piano. Graeme, now, will you sing the words of I've Got a Lovely Bunch of Coconuts to the tune of the theme from Swan Lake?
I've got a lovely bunch of coconuts. There they are, standing in a row. Big ones, small ones, some as big as your head. Give 'em a twist, a flick of the wrist, that's what the showman said. I've got a lovely bunch of coconuts. Every ball you throw will make me rich. There stands me wife, the idol of me life, singing roll a ball, a penny a peach. That's enough of that.